Thank you, guys. So welcome. For the next 30 minutes, you're going to enjoy hopefully some heated discussion around technology in operations. But before we get going, I'm really excited to welcome our group of panelists on the stage today. So I'll start next to me. I'd love to welcome Hannah Chabat, who is the CEO and founder of Hyber. We're then followed on stage by Chris Penny, who is SVP at Starwood Capital. We've got Rebecca Tobias, who is Managing Director of Independent Ventures. And lastly, beautifully there in the green, is Heather Byron, who is SVP of Services at Alliance. So to get us started today, we've got a 30-minute session, and we are going to leave 5 minutes at the end to make sure that we've got enough time to cover all the questions that hopefully you guys were wanting to be covered. If you don't have any questions, I definitely have at least 10 or 15 more, so don't allow me to speak too much today. But to get us started, we wanted to cover off some foundational topics that I think every one of us is thinking around when we're thinking around technology in operations. So to get us started, I'd love to direct a question firstly to kind of Heather and Hannah as they sit at opposite ends of the stage there as our kind of tech partners on stage. I think what we've seen in the industry today is sometimes we see that technology is lagging behind certain other industries, and there's certainly some gaps or some disparities that we see when it comes to what we should be providing to optimize on the revenue streams that should be available to us. So if you could take a couple of minutes, I'd love to hear around some of the gaps and the disparities that you're seeing.
Good question. Hospitality is vastly more advanced than the residential sector. They say that organizations, 6% of organizations, probably more, are still using spreadsheets for basic reporting, which is crazy. And the kind of biggest issue with even the property management systems that do exist is that they're so fragmented, so they don't have that kind of connected user journey. There's not very many APIs available, so you're having to have a lot of manual data being inputted, both from an internal perspective, but also from the user perspective. And that creates a really clunky experience. So this kind of shows the importance of needing to invest in systems that are connected, that really are focusing on a great user experience, because obviously that means better brand reputation, better retention of your users.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I think often we also don't think about what technology can bring to us. And for me and for us at Alliance, technology is something that we should see as an equalizer. So it should be the thing that allows us to deliver the same set of business insights or the same exceptional guest experience or resident experience, irrespective of where you are. And then the human touch on top of that is what allows you to bring that special secret sauce wherever you are. I think one of the things that we also have on us as technology partners, and we've been talking about a little bit about this backstage, is it's really on us to make sure that we want to collaborate across an industry to help you achieve that. There's absolutely no point in having technologies that don't want to be open, who don't want to share APIs, who want to be protective around their footprint in the market. Actually, it's on us to make sure we do all we can to bring the value that technology can bring to the businesses in a really equitable way. And I think that's really important. I think the other thing that's really interesting in the gaps is, as Hannah said, hospitality is ahead in some areas, really quite far ahead from residences, or we've been talking about all sorts of asset classes, senior living, student accommodation. But even within hospitality, luxury is much more advanced in maybe some of its technology investments, certainly in its concept of what a good guest experience is and how you get that loyalty from your guests and make them feel really known and wanted. And that delivery comes from people, but the underlying foundations is driven and is empowered by the technology. And I think that's something that is also really important to consider, the degree to which you want to be able to bring that bespoke service or that differentiation. And increasingly, we all have lives where we just expect stuff to work. We just expect technology to work. We expect to arrive somewhere and to be recognized. We expect our phone to open a door. And actually, increasingly when we don't get that experience, it's really frustrating. And actually there's no reason we couldn't offer that experience across the whole asset class, but it's a choice. But it should also continue to be a choice for the person who's the recipient too, so the guest or the resident or the visitor or the student. If they want to use their phone, great, but if they don't, then they shouldn't have to.
And I think it's a really good point. I think you've touched on there one of the biggest challenges, which is the want, the desire, the need to adopt it. But what other challenges are you seeing to achieving and bridging those gaps?
Just picking up on one thing you said, it's interesting. It'd be good if all the tech was open sourced and collaborative, but at the same point, you get a competitive edge by having that better service and delivering that better customer experience, which exactly I don't think Mandarin would want to be sharing their tech with their competitors. So again, it's just kind of interesting at the top end of the hospitality space. It is a very bespoke solution. But then as you drop down, it becomes more commoditized, right? That I don't think many people expect for Premier Inn to know what their preferences are for, well, Premier Inn's preferences are, is it water or water, right? It's not, do you want a Diet Coke when you check in or whatever, right? But the tech requirement flexes as you move through the kind of value chain. And I guess more on the operational real estate side, it just seems like it's completely fragmented and there's no services at all, right? It seems crazy that people are doing stuff in Excel rather than on proper systems. But I think that's like, as a non-tech person, but as a owner of real estate, owning some limited service, some hotels, some like luxury hotels, that's where I have to keep challenging our service providers is like, are we using appropriate tech for the product that we're trying to deliver to our customers?
It's really interesting though, isn't it? Because I would argue slightly that the technology isn't bespoke at that upper echelon of they're using the same basic technology platforms.
Just in a better way.
In a better way, or the differentiator is the human service on top of it. So the data they're using to surface to know those things
And
is how they're training their
hospitality.
staff and exactly the art of hospitality delivery.
Yeah.
See, not a tech guy, I walk into a room and a brand tells me they've got a bespoke solution, right?
Everyone has a
we
bespoke-
got to
we should
go.
talk.
We got to go with them because it's the best one, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. But within Resi, we're not talking about, technologies that you walk into a building and, your door speaks to you. We're talking about, there's some basic gaps where even if you're Apollo and you're investing 70 million pounds plus into student accommodation, you don't know on a daily basis your booking volumes. You don't have that transparency over how your inquiries are converting into viewings, into bookings, and how many dropouts you've had and retention rates. Like that basic visibility and transparency is missing. And that's what we need to focus on rather than trying to look at all the kind of smart, cutting edge technologies that you can bring in. It's like, just need the basics.
Yeah.
Just bring it
The
back to
basics
basics.
right.
Yes,
I'd lo-
absolutely, I agree. But the private equity firms, a lot of them are clients now, trying to educate them, firstly, where the cost of the tech goes in your P&L and how it features in your OPEX margins is a question, but I always get them to try and look at it. It's a mindset change. You need to look at investment in technology, not as a cost that hits your bottom line. You will see an ROI on that investment over time. It's hard to quantify day one, but it's looking at that investing in your tech stack, and it isn't always a bespoke solution. There are a lot of off-the-shelf tech that we could be using, but just in a much better way, in a creative way. So rather than building it in-house, buying it, which is a question.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
But we'll come back to that. But I think there's a big education piece there's a willingness, but a big resistance to move away from Excel, from my experience, what I see with a lot of my clients
So-
on the investor side.
I would like to take both of the points there. So Chris, you kind of moved on to a point there around you kind of walking into an investment portfolio and them just telling you that they've got bespoke technology and not really understanding why. And then Rebecca talking around how to help educate them around how to make those investment decisions. From an investor perspective, from both of your perspectives, what are you looking for from a good operator? What does good operations look like for you, and how do you kind of prioritize around those investment decisions?
Ooh, broad question. We're looking at optimizing cash flow, like simple principle, right? And it's about you get some operators that are really good on the cost side and some that are better on revenue, and the operator that's excellent at both of those is a very rare beast. And again, I think that's where we come to, or the Starwood Capital views, really trying to pick the right operator we're real estate investors, and we try and figure out what the optimal use of the real estate is, given like its macro location, micro location, and its unique characteristics. That drives branding, positioning, operating business, and then from that, you go and find the operator that fits in with that.
Okay.
So, do you want to do going back to a very old example that we have, we bought the Crown Plaza in Shoreditch, which then became the Ace Hotel that we sold. Like, that real estate wasn't the right fit or that brand for that market. We never considered making it a Four Seasons, right? So you really look at what are you trying to achieve from the real estate perspective. And then we did look at, should it be Standard, Public, you know, Ace, should it be whoever else? And when it came to, you know, a lot of the strength of the brand, you drive your revenues by customer loyalty and brand affiliation. And at the time, you know, the technology and the brand that was supported by the technology that Ace had made that the right fit for that asset. And again, that's where the technology can be a competitive advantage for a, you know, a brand that's growing. You know, why should someone stay in a Yotel versus a Holiday Inn Express or whatever? And it's like, well, as a customer, when you start your customer journey, I want to book a hotel in Edinburgh. And then you've got to have the revenue management and commercial side to make sure you get selected. But if once you land on the booking site, if you can't book efficiently in like 3 clicks, a customer's going to go somewhere else, right?
Yeah. And Rebecca, is that your experience as well? Are we looking beyond just those hard metrics?
Yeah, I think the operator experience is so key, and they should really be bringing with them, obviously through their experience and track record, this is the technology that we recommend using for our business. They still need to be able to sell that to their investor, the private equity guys who don't, you know as much as the operator clearly in terms of, you know, how does this impact my operating costs? How does this improve my efficiencies across the board? How is this enhancing my marketing, my conversions, my inquiries, my reporting of accurate data, which is extremely important, certainly, and Excel has its, obviously, prone for human error. So we need to rely on the operators to bring that level of experience, whatever sector they're in. But that's why we're backing that team and those operators, because they have those skills, they have the experience, and they should know what technology is in their market that best suits their business and be able to sell that.
So it sounds like when you're reviewing those portfolios, does technology truly sit high in what you're looking for from those operators? Are you questioning them around the technology that they have and they're operating with?
You're definitely doing a lot of diligence on it to see how much. You're probably more looking for like incremental returns that you can drive and like opportunity to improve the operations and outperform. And actually, if we see an asset that's performing okay and it's got terrible technology, that's brilliant, right? Because we should be able to buy that relatively at a fair price, work with some good partners, and be able to drive the profitability of that business. So actually, you know, and sometimes if you're looking at a technology stack and you're like, wow, this is really, really good, then it's, as an opportunistic investor that's looking to reposition a business, harder for us to buy into. But if you're looking at, by the time we come to sell a business, we do want to have optimized that technology stack, and you're selling it onto somebody that's, you know, got a more core cost of capital and is looking for a stable asset.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's probably how we view it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there needs to be an element that a lot of this is automated and tech-driven. And I mean, with the tech stack, it does get complex. We've been installing PMS systems, and it doesn't always link to the front-end booking system. APIs need to be built that extends your onboarding time significantly, not to mention costs of training your team, doing all the follow-up, and you need to really incentivize people at the end of the day to utilize the tech. It's not just a case of implementation. It's consistently, you know, tracking it and monitoring it and making sure everyone understands the value of the business across the whole, you know, level of management. So it's a big commitment. It's not just the upfront onboarding and upfront costs. It's consistently needs to be made a priority in the business.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think once we have passed on investment, because we just couldn't diligence the financials. The technology was so bad, right, that it was all Excels and you couldn't get anything to reconcile, and it was like, I don't believe the profitability that they're trying to sell this hotel off of, right? Because you know, in the hotel space, you have a PMS, you run the report from the PMS, that's your revenue.
Yeah.
So when you ask what's your revenue, and it takes them a couple of days to get back to you with a number that doesn't have an occupancy or an ADR, you get a little bit concerned.
Definitely feels like a red flag. That's not a question you can answer pretty much immediately as an owner. There.
Correct, right?
So I'd love to start on the probably the big topic that I have heard us discuss probably close to 15 years, if not more, is the decision making around whether or not we should be buying technology, building that in-house, should we be partnering? And I think this discussion has evolved over the years, but I don't think there is still a set answer. So I'd love to open it up to each of you on the panel to kind of get your view on how do you approach that? Heather, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I think it depends. And that's, it really depends. There are very good reasons to use a bought product. As you said, you've got some upfront cost. You've got the reliance on a third party to then run and maintain it for you. You've got, hopefully, great training and best practices that they bring to help you get the most out of that platform or that product. I think that can be a really great use case, and it's in a commoditized space where you've got large volume, not huge revenue or huge profits, that can work really well, and actually also works really well in luxury, senior living, students, etc. But that doesn't mean you should just discount custom. We have, I have a life before hospitality, and there is some great value in building your own. It absolutely does what you need. You've got the priority, you've got the commitment of ending up with something that is absolutely what suits you. The challenge with that comes then, though, do you have the headcount, the skills, or whatever in-house to then be able to maintain it and keep it relevant? Maintaining it for 2 years sounds really simple, but what happens in 10 years when maybe your business strategy has completely changed? That capital investment at the front and that ongoing investment can be much more significant. Mm-hmm. So I think there has to be a bit of a trade-off. We have an out-of-the-box platform. That's what we use at a lot of our customers, but we do have a services business, consulting business that does bespoke too. And you do get a balance of each. We've got a lovely app. Some people want to use the white label app and make it look like their own, and some people just want their own build because they need something very specific. Increasingly, though, what's interesting is we're seeing from a technology perspective, rather than building it all themselves, there's a real shift towards using SDKs. So using an SDK from a provider, whether that's, there are many in the market, it's not just us, being able to leverage the functionality and the data flow, but present that in your own website or your own app, I think it's a trend that I think is really lovely. It means you almost get that lovely hybrid of it's mine, but I can be powered by something that someone else can make sure maintains relevance, is regulatory compliant, grows and lives with the market as the market develops. But I think it depends.
Hannah?
I think it's important not to underestimate how hard it is to attract and retain great tech talent if you're in traditional real estate.
Yep.
Because how are you going to get the best developers to come into a very different culture where they're being managed by traditional operators versus, prop tech operations, which is vastly different, and the culture in every respect. So I think that's probably one of the biggest obstacles, trying to attract the best people to work in-house. And also the kind of age-old saying of don't reinvent the wheel. I think there is a lot of investment, especially in the UK, into prop tech. 10 years ago, it was just under £1 billion. Now it's over kind of £50 billion. So we're seeing a much more kind of fostering much more better prop tech ecosystem in the UK. And so being able to kind of plug in different systems that you use, that you need into an organization, and understanding what your secret sauce is, as we were talking about earlier, so that you can really double down on the kind of simple branded touch points that you need to set yourselves apart. And actually that's about combining the automation as well as the kind of human touch points. That we're in real estate, there will always be that physical element, and it's really important to actually really nurture an environment where you're on staff, the people actually that are going to be present in the building know how to treat customers, and investing in that side might actually be smarter than investing in technology that already exists, and there's plenty of better people to build that for you.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and actually I've never come across that. So, Rebecca.
Yeah, I would definitely advise investors not to be creating their own technology in-house. Stick to your core skill set. But operators, interestingly, in a business that both Heather and I are working with, I sit on the board of a short-term letting operator called Under the Doormat, and they identified a big gap in the market for technology for the short-term rental market and hospitality operators as well. that they've started selling their proprietary technology. And that, again, finding good tech people, outsourcing to tech teams that are cheaper in other parts of the world is a big cost saving. There's a smart way to do it if you identify a niche and a gap in the market where you see there is no technology for this space, so I am going to build it. And there's a lot of value in that down the line. So they identified that about 10, actually they've been going 10 years now. So it has taken a while, but I think given, again, also Hannah's point, how prop tech has evolved, there is a lot of great technology out there, but it is the lack of awareness, I would say, in the real estate market for what those tech products are is still, it's extremely limited, and I think that needs a big push, really, to bring prop tech and real estate together in a much more cohesive kind of way. But also collaboration is a big point. Under the Doormat is collaborating actually with Heather's business now. And it's not pitching businesses against each other as competitors. It's actually bringing everyone together to say, look, we're trying to disrupt an industry. And the real estate industry is one of the largest industries globally. And it's the least advanced in terms of new technology. Why don't we all come together, work together to try and solve this massive problem? And there isn't enough of that. And Heather's doing a great job of joining forces, so it's great. But we do need more of it.
Chris, anything to add?
Just that you need real scale to be able to support building your own product outright, and how applicable is that? And then, not directed at anyone on the panel, but I'm sure tech guys have a incentive to push bespoke solutions, right? Because it's probably more profitable for their business. So, don't know, but off the
Sure.
No.
I'm not sure, actually, but I think that's a really interesting point, because actually the perception is always really important, right? I'm not sure. I would argue that an annual recurring revenue from a SaaS business is probably, if you look at longer term, and the relationship from it is probably more valuable than a shorter upfront, big bang kind of bespoke build. But it's really interesting to hear the perspective.
But once you're in, you're kind of business critical, right? Or
It depends whether you stay in. You can build it and they can run it, right?
It's also very costly for tech companies to have to build bespoke integrations for every single one of their clients.
Yeah.
And then you end up completely losing that scale. And then you completely rely on those big clients. So then if Starwood decides to exit, you've lost majority of your business.
or maybe there's an incentive for the chief technology officer of the business to push for a bespoke solution, so then they can have a team below them.
Oh, I feel like we need to do like a round table discussion on this. Let's do that. We have some good time, so I'd love to turn to the audience and ask if you guys have any questions. I definitely have at least 2 or 3 more, but I would love to turn to you guys first. I don't know who's moderating out there, but I can see the first hand here. I don't know if there's a microphone, is there? There's one coming. If there's someone you want to direct the question to, just call that out. Otherwise, we'll pick whoever is.
No, just as a general question, we're talking a lot about tech, but we're on one side also see more and more AI getting into tech. We also saw in the presentation this morning that I think 90% of the jobs were at risk from AI partly taking over the jobs. How do you look at that from a tech perspective related to, well, the field that you're working in?
I think it depends on the industry. In self-storage, we have a couple of self-storage businesses in my previous firm, and we're using technology to replace on-site staff, which is a significant reduction in our operating costs, which makes our businesses obviously more profitable. But I think overall, there's still the need, especially as we were saying in hospitality, to combine the technology with the human experience, because it's not just about collecting the data points, it's interpreting them. It's understanding how those data points impact your business. What is causing things to swing either way, and what's the underlying issues around that? That's not something that AI can solve for us. That still needs human interaction. So, and people will still want the human touch, regardless of if you're providing more efficiency through technology. And, as the world evolves and becomes more tech savvy, some people want a fully automated experience and will not want to speak to someone in person. And that will be some of the younger generations coming through. But I still think there's going to be a fundamental need for that human,
I would agree.
yeah,
I would agree with
interaction
that.
or even just explanation from a person who understands the underlying business and the operations itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that completely. I think there are areas of technology where AI and technology can absolutely be a headcount replacement. I was on a panel with an event with the Clay Door with Stuart Greif from Forbes and Shane Flaherty from Microsoft Travel. And there was a big conversation about AI, and actually, you imagine a big concierge. It was a big concierge audience. They've got a big question about, actually, is technology now going to start to replace me because I'm a concierge, and if the technology can tell you all the same answers, then why do you need me? And there was a really resounding perspective that actually, as we've been saying, that the technology is there to give you something more. It's not there to replace the person, because that human touch and secret sauce is so pivotal. That is the differentiation of a brand, whether that's a residence, whether that's a student accommodation, whether that's a senior living, anything. The human touch is so critical. I think the AI factor is also really interesting because it's maturing, but it's not mature. It's not ready to take over the world. We've got AI in our product. We very consciously launched it to be a sidekick, so it's a whisper bot, so it can guide staff to an answer, or it can guide staff to a consistent paragraph of a standard operating procedure, so they deliver consistently. But we deliberately didn't launch with a chatbot that would give an answer directly to a guest, because tone and translation and all of those things need someone who can just say, does that make sense? Is that right for that guest? So I think the choice is important. It's great where it can work, fantastic, and it can reduce cost for sure. Do I think it's for us in hospitality and in kind of front guest-facing roles? We're not seeing it as a replacement at all. We're seeing it as an absolutely an and.
And just another perspective on that is, I guess you can frame it as repurposing team resource.
Yeah.
So you're able to actually upskill those people that were doing jobs that are manual. For example, in our world, it would be uploading listings, writing descriptions, making sure the photos are optimized. Like, that can all be done by basic AI. And then those people that were doing those manual jobs can then be upskilled into sales, new business, property management, so those touch points when you arrive at your property for the first time. So really be able to double down to the customer experience, and really then focusing human time on creative solutions that only kind of humans can do versus, the manual tasks that can be automated.
We talk a lot about typically people who are doing front-facing roles didn't join hospitality to sit at a computer.
Yeah.
So actually, how can we use technology to mean they don't have to do that as much and they can do more out doing the things that they enjoy, which is having that human connection.
Yeah.
But I also don't think customer experience can be fully outsourced and automated. I don't think that's what the consumer wants. And we do have to look at consumer behavior and what our end users want as an experience. And that's not a fully, I don't think, tech AI-driven solution. But AI, the best businesses out there will be utilizing all aspects of AI to enhance their business, for sure.
Any other
Yep.
questions? Thank you.
Hi. I think for client-facing roles, Heather is totally right. You still want the human interaction, but for a lot of the data analysis, when Chris is advocating the sort of bespoke solutions for everything, surely investors want everything to be consistent. They want as much comparability as possible. Do the bespoke solutions not complicate that?
Well, there are technology solutions that solve that problem. So we work with some providers where pretty much every single manager we work with has its own slight way of reporting. They all send that reporting to one provider who then customizes that and sends it back to us. And his businesses, the guys that work for him are probably at risk from AI. But Starwood used to have 3 analysts that would just take Excels and move them into different Excels, and we outsource that to a company that hires 3 analysts to do it.
Yeah.
And those guys will probably get fixed by AI. But I think that there's a lot of, that's where AI and technology, and I have seen in not just real estate, but other private equity firms and, reporting to our investors, where, that data integration and consolidating different data sources, as long as it's consistent each month, then you can aggregate that up and roll it up.
Yeah, I would say for investor reporting, you can really heavily automate that.
Yep.
But in order to get holistic data sets, I think I spoke about this in the last panel, but there needs to be that trust element to be able to share data with a third party, to then consolidate that data, then to provide the reports across the market. So the big issue in residential is that you don't have comparisons across PBSA, co-living, build-to-rent, HMO. An example, last year when in student accommodation, you saw a huge number of cancellations and fake bookings. So when it came to the point of move-in in September, although markets that could have been rented 3 times over, they were sitting on voids because there were fake bookings and there were empty rooms, and then they missed out on that market cyclical nature. So we suggested we could create an encrypted database and everyone could provide the booking data, obviously GDPR, no issues there, be protected, encrypted, etc. But there was real resistance to do that because everyone was very nervous around trusting a third party to handle that data. And actually, although you could save millions of pounds to understand what to be able to discover fake bookings at an earlier point, the risk of something going wrong and the kind of concern around sharing their data actually outweighed the benefits of having a holistic data set. So that element of trust is so important. And I think in the residential sector, we're not there yet.
Thank you so much. And I think with that, we've come to the end of our time today. I do want to say a huge thank you to our panellists today. If you can just put your hands together in a round of applause.